The film opens with a helicopter cutting across the endless desert. Inside sit Jen and Richard, enjoying the high life on their way to Richard's luxurious remote retreat. The pilot, Roberto, casually hands Richard a welcome gift before dropping them off. Inside the glass and concrete getaway, Jen and Richard waste no time diving into a passionate night together. But the mood shatters when Richard gets a phone call. It's his wife. Jen's expression shifts. She knew he was married, but hearing it ruins the fantasy. Still, Richard's charm reels her back in. For Jen, the fun continues, but there are cracks forming already. The next morning, Jen wanders through the kitchen and freezes. Two strange men stand outside in full tactical hunting gear. She calls out to Richard, confused. They weren't supposed to be here yet. These are his hunting buddies, Stan and Dmitri, who arrived a full day early. Richard introduces everyone, but the atmosphere instantly curdles. Stan and Dmitri gawk at Jen, knowing very well Richard has a wife. Their eyes linger too long. Too interested, too hungry. Later that night, the four of them party. Drinks, music, drugs. The welcome gift Roberto gave earlier is brought up again in casual conversation, with Richard recounting a story of a man who cut off his own leg while high on this drug and didn't feel a thing. He asks Jen to hide it so none of them do anything stupid. She cleverly hides it in her pendant. Fueled by booze and adrenaline, Jen wants to dance. Richard refuses, so she grabs Stan instead. She dances seductively, playfully, not realizing she is lighting a fuse she cannot see. Richard watches long enough to get jealous and pulls Jen back to their room, where the night ends with another heated encounter. Morning arrives and Jen steps outside, sitting next to Stan while waiting for Richard to return. But the moment turns unsettling fast. Stan stares at her, not speaking, not blinking. Jen, feeling creeped out, retreats to her room and begins packing. She just wants to go home. But when she catches Stan staring at her again, this time while she's changing, everything collapses. He flirts. She rejects him, and in anger, Stan forces himself on her. Dmitri witnesses it, and simply walks away. Richard finally returns. The way Stan and Dmitri sit stone-faced on the couch, he knows immediately something is wrong. But when he finds Jen, still shaken and traumatized, the truth hits him like a hammer. Later, Jen falls asleep from exhaustion. When she awakens, Richard is sitting calmly beside her. Too calm. Instead of comforting her, he tries to buy her silence. But Jen just wants to leave. She begs him to call the helicopter. And then she makes her fatal mistake. She threatens to tell Richard's wife if he doesn't help her escape. Richard slaps her. Jen bolts out the door. Stan and Dmitri hear the commotion, and all three men chase her into the desert. Jen reaches the cliff's edge with nowhere left to run. Richard puts on a performance, pretending he's calling the helicopter, pretending she's safe. And just as she lets her guard down, he shoves her off the cliff. Jen plummets, slamming into a tree branch that impales through her abdomen. She hangs there, unconscious and dying. Above, the men clean up any trace of her existence, burning her belongings like she was never there. They plan to return later and dispose of her body. But Jen wakes, barely, and finds herself covered in ants and pierced through by the tree. In agony, she spots her lighter nearby, just out of reach. Using her earphones as a hook, she drags the lighter closer and sets the tree on fire. The weakened, burning wood snaps, dropping her to the ground below. Jen hears engine sounds. The men are approaching. Summoning the last bits of strength she has, she crawls behind rocks and disappears from sight. When the hunters finally reach the cliff and see no body, panic builds. That night they scale down to the burned tree and find a blood trail. They split up to search. Richard and Dmitri take off in opposite directions while Stan stays behind. Jen stumbles through shallow river water, exhausted. When she hears Dmitri approaching, she hides. Dmitri stops to relieve himself, leaving his gun unattended. Jen attempts to take it, but it's a trap. Dmitri lunges, and a violent, desperate struggle erupts. Bloodied but furious, Jen wins. Dmitri dies in the river, and she takes his gear and his ATV. She rides until the fuel runs dry, forcing her to continue on foot. She finds refuge in a cave, builds a fire, and prepares for the unthinkable, removing the chunk of wood still lodged in her stomach. The pain is unbearable, but she remembers the drug, the one strong enough to make a man amputate his own leg without pain. She takes it. Reality warps and distorts as the drug takes over. Under its numbness, Jen cuts the wound open wider, pulls the branch out, and cauterizes it using a heated metal can. A brutal, agonizing process she barely survives. The can leaves a permanent phoenix-like burn tattoo across her abdomen before she collapses into unconsciousness. Morning rises. Richard and Stan wait impatiently for Dmitri, not knowing he's already dead. When his body floats past them in the river, they hide it, argue, and press onward. Jen is transformed, hallucinating one after another, until she finally wakes up, disoriented and newly scarred with a badass burn mark. Eventually, her senses return. She's no longer prey. She's a hunter. She scouts the area and catches signs of Stan and Richard splitting up. Stan's car eventually runs out of gas, and as he refuels, Jen strikes, shooting him and forcing him into the mountains. Following a trail of blood, she unknowingly walks into Stan's ambush. He wounds her, but Jen manages to dodge the remaining shots. She remembers he only has one shoe on and breaks her flashlight on the nearby rocks, setting a trap. It works. He collapses, pulling the glass out of his foot in agony. Stan gets in his car and floors it, determined to run her down. Jen fires back, a lucky, perfect shot, and Stan is put to rest, crashing the vehicle. Another threat eliminated. Richard is seen back at the rendezvous point, but Stan is nowhere to be found. Frustrated, he heads back to the retreat house. Back at the retreat house, Richard showers, believing Stan is simply running late. But when he hears a sound, he grabs his gun and searches the house naked and dripping, only to turn around and find Jen standing behind him, gun raised. The woman he thought he killed now stands reborn in blood and fire. A savage gunfight erupts through the house. Jen wounds Richard badly, but the slick floors soaked with blood make every step treacherous. They chase each other in a dizzying maze of crimson footprints, predator and prey swapping roles every second. Jen slips, dropping her gun, and Richard seizes the advantage, knocking her out. Instead of finishing her, he monologues, giving her time to wake up and jabbing him in his open wound. Both fall, but Jen crawls for her shotgun and fires. Richard collapses, joining his buddies in the afterlife. Jen stands alone in the ruined house, soaked in blood, transformed beyond recognition. She walks out and stares into the vast desert. No longer the innocent girl who arrived in a helicopter, but a survivor forged by brutality, pain, and sheer will. This is her revenge.